Hello, I'm Rich Foley from Blue Rose Copper and Restoration Shop. This is a copper sculpture I'll be making today. It's a sacred geometric symbol called a Genesa crystal. Do a Google search if you'd like to know more about this. Okay, let's get started. I had to use 1/2 inch plywood and I cut a 24-inch circle. And I divided the circle up into quadrants. And that's what I'm going to use for forming my copper tubing. It's soft copper tubing. It's 5/8 OD. You can make it any size you want. You can use 1/2 inch, you can use 3/8, you could even use 3/4. That's overkill. I screwed this to the 3/4 inch plywood and I took my tubing and I formed it around there. So to get started, I started making the circle with pushing the copper tubing tight to this 1/2 inch plywood, and then I put some screws in there just to hold it, to help me. Then very carefully you form this soft copper tubing around that circle. And it's soft and it's malleable and it's bendable. You form it around and then screw in some screws just to hold it in the position. Keep forming it around. Keep putting a screw in every little bit to hold it. That holds that tight to that 1/2 inch plywood. You keep bending around and bending around and bending around. After you get your piece shaped in a round and cut the length, you join them together with a coupling, 1/2 inch copper coupling. You put your soldering paste on there and you just put some heat on that with a torch. I have 4 rings soldered together. They're all the same size and they're perfectly round. I kept them in my jig. And now I have to fasten them together into the sculpture to make that geometric pattern. So I started with the first 2 rings and I tacked them together and soldered them in position. These 2 rings are perpendicular to each other. And the way I did that is I set it on my round pattern, my round jig, and I lined it up with the lines that I had drawn on there. And I eyeballed down both sides and tacked it together. So right now these are perfectly put together in 90-degree pieces. That's how you have to start it. Then you have to divide this up equally, these sides up equally. Divide these up equally. See, I have these marks on there. So the next set of copper rings set into the shape, and that gives it the shape of the geodesic crystal or the Genesa crystal. So that's going to be my next step. I'm doing my final step of soldering the last ring into the Genesa crystal. The last ring is clamped in here with these vice grips. I've got the whole crystal clamped into a bench vise. It's a portable bench vise that I have to hold it steady. And the tricky part is all four of these rings are exactly the same size. So when you try to install them together and jam them together, they don't just jam together easily. What you have to do is you have to separate the last two. You have to separate the pipes at the copper fitting, the splice fitting, which is this thing. You have to separate it, then weave it in to the sculpture until you find that sweet spot. You've got marks on here where they want to land. You find that sweet spot, and you'll find it. You just have to play with it. And then they're all touching. All these things are touching here. And now I can solder them. And what I'm using is, I'm using an acetylene torch, which it allows me to control the solder a lot better. So now I'm going to tack these all together and do my final soldering. I'm using a flux, a liquid flux. You can also use a paste flux. It'll do the same job. Here's my finished sculpture. I made it for a friend, and now I'm going to show you where I'm going to locate it and hang it for its permanent location. This is the final location for the sculpture. I'm Rich Foley, Blue Rose Copper and Restoration Shop. Thanks for watching.